Live. Say hello in the chat if you can hear us loud and clear.
Hello in the chat if you can hear us loud and clear.
Nice.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Keep it professional, Mikey.
Yes, all the time. Welcome, everybody. I am full of cold, so if I need to disappear at some point, I'll let you know.
Professional, Mikey.
Yes. I can hear myself. There we go. I've muted myself, and you.
I've muted us too. I heard us 3 times. We're professional.
Yes. Hello, everybody, and good evening.
Hello, everybody's.
We have been playing lots with... Oh, I was saying, sorry, I lost train of thought there, that I've got a cold, so I might need to cough and splutter, in which case I'll disappear for a bit. Thank you, children. Thank you.
Adults. I don't have a cold, but I've also realised I've had about 1 pot of coffee less than normal. I might make less sense than usual.
Impossible. Impossible.
Apparently we're loud.
We're loud. Good.
Yeah.
Is that loud because... Wow, loud. Do we usually mumble? We did do a sound check beforehand.
I'm echoing. I'm echoing.
You're echoing.
I'm hearing... Yeah. We are the tortillas, my friend.
Oh, I wonder if Discord's not doing its... well, if I can hear echo, or if you can hear echo, I'll put my headphones on. Because it might be Discord not doing the noise cancellation properly. Oh, it helps if you plug them in the other end as well. Excellent. Yes, good evening, everybody.
I wonder if I should go be a Zen monk for a while. Hi, everyone. Am I still echoing?
So echo on Yan, I can turn it down, it's fine. Mic is fine. Yan, echo. I think it might have been just a feedback loop from my speakers.
Lack of headphones.
I think we'll now be sorted. Hopefully so. Let us know if not, and we'll sort that out.
Hello, everybody. So yeah, Mikey has a cold. I'm a little bit bleary. Well, not much, but a little bit bleary. But we've been working quite hard on the game this week.
Been playing with some assets, seeing...
Well, shall we show them what we have so far?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to do it on your side, or shall I do it on mine?
I haven't pulled it yet, so if we stream, and if it does that horrible noise distortion thingy again, I'll pull... Well, in the background, I'll pull the repository anyway.
Okay, so I'm going to load it, and I'm going to share my screen. I want to share MagRacer. And that should be sharing MagRacer. Is it sharing MagRacer?
It is indeed. You're now full screen.
Okay, so we have a bunch of teams, some of which you've seen. I've just been playing with these. I know how to play this game. So let's go with, I don't know, HSC. And I'll make this nice and big.
Thanks, Israel Studios, for letting us know the audio is good now. So it was headphones.
Appreciate it. Okay, first I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the AI, because currently there is a bug in the AI where we break mathematics. We're not sure what it is. It seems to be Euclid. But as you can see, we've changed the way that the game is looking. We've put in these little concrete textures. This is all very, very early. We've also got some basic weapons coming in here, so I've got the shockwave I can use. Is this loud, by the way, Mikey?
I can hear it absolutely fine, and I think everybody listening can also hear it.
Because I lowered the volume earlier just in case.
Yeah.
But I've got the shockwave, which, oops, I've just eliminated a bunch of players. And they're right back to where they started.
Yes, so we've got a damage system now as well.
We have a damage system as well. In fact, if I ram the wall, you'll see that my shield, the bottom left, starts taking damage, right? There's some stuff I want to talk about a little while we're doing that. I'm just going to show you a little bit more of the aesthetic. So the idea is this very, very simple concrete look with the sandy mountains in the background with splashes of color, right? We're thinking the neons and the lights and the trails should be where the detail is. Rather than trying to make everything flat shaded and toon shaded, let's go for a realistic concrete look. And let's go for the giant statue that I am calling Maddie because of reasons. And I'm going to just go see the statue of Maddie. Hello, Maddie.
Oh, bounce, bounce, bounce.
So, this is what we have so far, and I think that's a good place to stop that sharing. So, we've changed the aesthetic quite dramatically by changing this concrete thing and changing how the colors look.
Yeah.
We were bouncing back and forth a lot with what the game will look like. And at one point it was like, should it look a bit like Rocket League? Should it look a bit like, is it look like those old Batman cartoons? And eventually we came up with the idea that it should look like realistic concrete city with high-tech force fields and glowy lights in places.
Yeah.
And what we found is the moment we did that, the game felt very different.
It changed almost the way it was played and the feeling of going along. And we've been playing today. That's in fact, we might go through a bit of adding assets to the game because there's a few extra bits and bobs that aren't quite ready for the game. One of the things we're toying with at the moment is scale. And this is something that when you're building something and you're putting all of these different assets together, I made a tunnel asset, made it good size, imported the ship into Blender, went, yeah, that looks pretty good, put it in the game. It was at least half the size it needed to be because we're going so quickly. Everything needs to be bigger.
Yep. So we've been toying a lot with the aesthetic, and Mikey's been making little bits and pieces, and some of which we think work, and some of them aren't quite ready yet. It is coming on quite nicely. And what we found is, so at the moment those ships we have, they have very detailed textures. In fact, they're 2048 by 2048. Probably way more than they need, but they're so close to the camera, it really shows off. And then when we start putting in details in other places, the place just feels more real. The race feels more aggressive. The other drivers start getting personalities. And then dropping in those other teams, those other paint schemes, effectively, makes the game feel a lot more alive. So there's a lot we want to talk about with that. But first, I'm just going to see, do we have any questions? Not yet. Cool. Mikey, do you have a place you would like to start? Because I've been doing all the waffling.
All the waffling. Waffling. Actually, if I go get my Git Kraken open, and actually pull that stash back that I just made.
Sounds good.
Because even though we've parted here just a little, it's really useful to see. I mean, I was going to make a branch, so I'll just pop this back out, and hopefully some of the assets that I've been adding and playing around with, and again, alpha assets, we're just testing things here. Let's open up Godot. So, hopefully that will be visible to everybody. I think I can just start the game. And just like Jan here, I need to be careful that we don't crash the game. So let's begin the race. Yeah, that's looking good my end as well. Cool. So, I added some gantries to the track as well. Oh, I need to wait for it to actually go and finish. So they start, and then I can disable this. Oh, my controller's not on. Absolutely fine here.
That would keep it professional, Mikey.
Yeah. There we go. So we've got a gantry there, and then we've got these small ones. And just adding something like that to the track makes a ton of difference to how the game is playing and feels. I think I've got the other assets.
You've also made the force fields really big.
I have. That was an accident. I don't know what I'm doing. Check out that asset in the background there. There's a bridge. Oh, crash, crash. In fact, you can see on this screen I don't have the damage yet, so this is an older build. So there's a suspension bridge there we've logged into the game. And there's also, I think, a tunnel. Yeah, the tunnel's just there. So, obviously this needs rescaling. This is an example here of when you're bringing an asset into the game, how you're like, oh, well, how do we manage this? Because the track and everything else, we can't have it looking like that. Do we alter the track? Do we alter the... Whoa, that's quick. Do we alter the assets? How do we fit things together? So I think we're going to end up going back to the drawing board when it comes to the city and its layout and being much more precise of where things are going to be. In fact, I've covered up the lovely assets here in the tunnel with my giant force field. But there we go, yeah.
we have a lot of flexibility with what we're doing. Okay, so I feel like I should be showing my screen when I explain this.
Yeah, by all means.
I've also got old Skunk Anansie songs in my head. So if you know Skunk Anansie, they're a great band from Britain from the 90s. They never made it to the States. Great band. You should check them out. But that's what I need to share. Is that the right screen? Yes. Okay. If I open up the level.
Let's bring that across.
Okay, so the current implementation of curves in Godot causes a problem. And what's happening is if you see these light blue lines, are they showing on camera, Mikey?
Yeah, well, I can see them. I don't know whether it'll be visible on stream. Yeah.
So what's happening is we have a path. And this path is a bunch of Bezier curves. This is a very big path. It's a 6-kilometer closed loop, right? And we can take any of these Bezier handles and we can curve it in 3 dimensions, which gives us a lot of flexibility. Because of the way it's built, this means we can redesign the level at any point by just grabbing one of these and moving them. But it's going to take a second to update. I'll say a second. It's going to take 30 seconds to update. Boom. So that gives us lots and lots of flexibility. And because of the way it's being done, I just press Control-Z to undo that. So give me a second. Because of the way it's being done, we can now make sure that the level can easily be changed. And what we have is the track is a CSG polygon that is following the path. So I'm just telling it, you're a path mode, keep following it. It's a joined path, so make it a loop. Keep the faces smooth. It's continuous, don't allow any breaks. And we're doing that once for the track.
Yeah.
We've got these 2 collision walls. That's what you've added in. This is what's stopping us flying off the track. We've also got these rails, which are purely decorative.
Ah.
But now, it means...
Now I know what I turned on the walls and off the rails.
Yep. But it means there's a lot we can do. The first thing we can do is we can change the look of this city, right? So right now we've got a few buildings. We've got this horrible blocky bit here, which doesn't look too bad when you're down here, but this has to go. All of that's good, but it also means our AI is a lot simpler than it would be if we were using a navigation mesh. So normally what you do is you'd have a bunch of road assets, and you draw an invisible navigation map over it. So it's a big mesh that's just saying, here's where you're allowed to go. And then every time it needed to do something, it would say, okay, I am here, I want to go here, plot a bunch of curves through this mess. What we're doing here is we're saying, all right, you start here, look ahead by a certain amount, which we define in script. It's actually, where's the look ahead? 75 meters. Nope, that's wrong. Never mind, it's in the script. Look ahead by 10 or 15 or 20 meters, however long it is, and then calculate which way you're actually going. So follow through your velocity and your vector and find out where you're going. Follow through where you want to be going, and then check that angle and steer accordingly. That is a much easier calculation than take this entire 6-kilometer track, turn it into a mesh, and plot a course, and redo that every frame. This means that we think we can have maybe 12 ships in GD script with no C# and not see any slowdown. We need to do some tests with that, and right now there's a bug in the AI, which means it will just crash. It'll break mathematics. We're dividing by 0 somewhere. We don't know where it is yet. And I should point out that the AI is kind of amazing. I will talk about what's happening there in a moment. At least the preliminaries of it are amazing. But yeah, so this curve allows us to do a lot of things. Now, downsides. Changing this takes a while. Right now I've got a 3.1, 3.2. If I change anything to do with this curve, it'll redraw all of these meshes, recalculate everything, and then send a bunch of signals. There's something going wrong in it. So it's time consuming. It's much easier to do this first and then place the things. But it does mean if we want to put Mikey's bridge here, his bridge is too long, right? We could just add more bits of track. We could curve them around. We could do whatever we wanted, right? So that's all doable. And the whole game would just adapt to it. Like this is just an extrusion, that's an extrusion. It's all going to work fine. It means it works great for navigation. It's going to work great when I start putting in the racing logic. So I could say, okay, who's in first place, who's in second, what's on third.
Yeah.
Downsides, we can't do loop-de-loops, which we can't do anyway with our physics. We can't split the track. It's got to be one curve. There's some cheats we could do with that, but it's going to make navigation a pain. So yeah, there are ups and downs. So yeah, that was the bit I wanted to show there.
Awesome. Let me bring everything back into frame, including me. I had a little coughing fit there, so I turned myself down. Yeah, so this is really coming together, and I've been playing a lot in Blender as well, trying to get assets together.
Yeah.
One of the ones that I'm quite proud of is as a very simple asset, but it enables Jan to come to me and say, Mike, can you actually make it higher or wider without having to do too much effort? So I'm actually going to open up Blender and go and find where I need to show things. It's being very slow on my computer at the moment. In fact, I think my computer's about to fall over itself at some point. It feels like that anyway. So yeah, placeholder bit of road here with a gantry over the top. Very simple, 2 objects. However, the way that I've put them together means that if I move them in stages or grids of 4, I can make this as wide as I like. You can see if I don't quite make it, there's a gap left there. And I can push that all the way back in, make it this tall. Or if I bring my control back, which is just the height of this one as well, I can just bring it up and down. So being able to control your assets like this, it didn't take long to set up, but it did take a bit of thought on how to link all the drivers and stuff together so that I can move things and it just appear where necessary. And obviously it will only fill a gap in a as I was saying, in gaps of I think 4 units. The important thing is to have a unit scale for your assets, because if you don't do that, it becomes a real pain trying to work out at what point do you divide or add or take. If you've got a unit scale, you can just do whole numbers with that, and that makes things so much easier. So yeah, that's just a little inkling into the modelling for something as simple as a gantry. Using the skin modifier, by the way, to get a simple shape like this made really quickly.
I like that a lot. And we've kind of had a discussion today about Mikey was showing me the bridge he'd made, right? Which you guys just saw. And for some reason, it wasn't clicking with me. And Mikey's like, well, I've modeled this off a real bridge. And it occurred to us, we're sort of doing 2 things here. We're making a realistic gritty city.
Yeah.
And we're making this high-tech cyberpunk experience. And we sort of need to pick one.
So I'm just going to go and grab the bridge asset itself. I'm trying to do it off screen, but...
You may as well just do it on screen. Oh, you don't want to share passwords and things.
Oh, no, it's not that. It's just I wanted... You were talking. So this is the bridge. In fact, you can see whilst I've been moving it around in this particular scene, I've managed to not select part of the model, which is always awesome when you do something silly like that. And because the whole thing's symmetrical about itself, I can fix that quite easily with a mirror, hopefully. There we go. That brings both of those 2 back. Yeah, but very simple, straightforward mesh. And this one's the final one, the output model for Jan, so it's all just one object. But obviously, building something like this, you don't want it just as one object. You really want to make sure it's as modular as possible. So I created a new scene to export things on. And then I can do things like make this thing taller with the array modifier here. I can build things up. This isn't quite as fancy as the gantry, because it's a more complex object. If you're trying to do this with something this complex and trying to make it so that things swap around really easily, I don't think it's worth it for this particular asset. But this I was quite proud of. So the way that this is created is using a curve and a model, and then using the curve deform, as we can see here. So we've got just a single asset down here, which is the pipe, the connection, and the wires, and we make that fit the curve, and that goes wee as it deforms with the curve. But obviously, if you don't have... this is all sticking out horribly here. If I go and hide this, this is what this looks like. I mean, it looks more like a funky necklace at the moment than anything else. But using a Boolean cut through all of that, and suddenly it makes your life a lot easier. I mean, there are other things that I'd love to do to tidy up, like where these intersect. I'd much prefer it to be in the middle of these blocks, and in some cases, like here and here, it's not. It's just offset slightly. But I figured at that point it was diminishing returns. I was going to end up focusing on a model and not getting the most from it.
There's a little trial and error as well as we... this is something we'll have to talk about when we... I'm pausing because we need to... well, okay. If we just get the base Kickstarter, we'll be providing the assets to you. If we get to a stretch goal, we'll be doing an extra course on how to make them. So we'll probably just be providing them. But if we don't, if we go beyond that, we did a lot of trial and error on getting the files just right. Because if you just export them, one or two things will happen. Either it'll export as GLTF, which Godot will say, nope, I don't know what this is. Like, I know what this is, but I can't read it. Or it'll bring them through, and like the bridge was 75 meg. And it took us a while to figure out what's happening with the textures. And it turns out Blender is just saying, well, you wanted a high quality texture, so here's a high quality texture.
Yes.
You remove that, and it's 3K.
Yeah, the mesh data itself is very small. So we've got a bit of a pipeline that we're working on at the moment to try and smooth things out and get everything flowing really well between me creating assets and Jan using them. And it's proper planning and preparation like normal. We've made a wiggly track, we've put in rough assets, and now is really the time to start going back, drawing out a carefully laid plan, and then putting placeholder assets in place that we can just swap out with higher quality assets as it comes in. But then we know the bridge is going to be 600 meters long exactly. Therefore, we can make sure the track in that section is how it should be.
There's a couple of ways you could approach this, right? You could build the city, or just build it, and then afterwards, I will go in with a track and draw the curve from the path.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's draw the curve in the path. Sorry, it's quite warm in here, so I've got a lot of breath. And then put in assets one by one. They both work fine, but you have to have one workflow. Like trying to do both at the same time, we just get in each other's way. I also want to get a lot of little detail in. Like we were watching some videos of Wipeout, which were quite open. Like that's the inspiration for this game. This game does not play like Wipeout. There's some stuff you can do in this game that you cannot do on Wipeout and vice versa. Like I was watching a video of Wipeout and there's a vertical drop. We can't have you following the curve down 90 degrees. It's dramatic, but our physics won't let that happen. If you fall off the edge, you're just going to fly. Like you have momentum.
Yeah.
But one thing I'd like to do is like, you know, a little section of graffiti over here, or a noodle stall, or, you know, a couple of billboards or something like that. It's gone.
Never mind. Well, building a city is no small feat. We're, you know, a 6 kilometer section of track is quite a lot to do, especially with the speeds we're going. So it's going to be a very large area. And then making it convincing outside of there as well. So you've not just got the detailed buildings that you're flying past. And one of the things that we were thinking about the other day was, well, hang on a minute. If we make the assets really close to the player, so it's more like you're flying through a tunnel rather than a big open city, it gives the sense of speed so much more than when it's big and open. And I think a mixture of that on the track is very useful. So, for instance, as we come round to the bridge, if that opens up, that's brilliant. You can see the vista and everything, and then it closes back down again.
I mean, I think there's going to have to be a whole section on level design. Not on building things, not on coding things, just on how you lay them out, like the experience. Because you want to create... When I first made the track, right, the track hasn't changed shape in a long time. But there were no landmarks. There were little bits of track that did odd things, and people remember that. But there's no sense of speed or scale because it's just a thing you're following. The moment we start putting buildings in, those buildings start becoming landmarks. What we want to do is curate little neighborhoods almost, little vignettes on the track, little moments that give you a certain feeling. And a good example of this, and I'm going to wibbity wobbity. Where did you go? No, that's wrong. Don't.
I need a little graphic of you thinking and the Windows circle going around. Yan buffering.
Please hold. Jan's brain is frozen. He is distracting himself. Make sure I can see. I can't see you at the same time. Yes, I can. What am I doing? Jan, is this your first time on the computer? Okay, so we have this area here. And what we notice, and again, this is looking at Wipeout, and Wipeout cut some very clever corners, right? There's a lot of stuff they did that makes the game feel a lot bigger and more open world than it actually is. But this is effectively a canyon. So what we need to do is not worry so much about what's happening to the edge here. Like, none of that's important. We could put in detailing and side streets and so on up to about here, and then block them off.
Yeah, definitely.
So now what we've got is, don't design a world and a city, design the track. Right?
What do you want the experience for the player to be at that point in the game?
Mm-hmm. So we've got this little vignette here, and I'm thinking we could put some gantries around this bridge, and maybe a little wall here with some graffiti and stuff. You know, stuff you'd expect, or under the bridge here, stuff you'd expect to see. But the moments that everyone remembers is, first, we come round here, and right there, the statue of Maddie, right? Like that moment, long stretch like that with a big statue in the background, that is a memorable moment. And that's what you're going for. You're going for those vignettes. There's also one here with this holographic screen that I'm going to have to change. I didn't have anywhere to put it, so I just made it float in the air and be transparent. But there's a camera here that watches the vehicles go past. And when you've got all the races coming past, you've got little colored streams reflecting back at you. It's a really lovely moment. And you come around here, and here is the Tunnel of Shame. It's called the Tunnel of Shame because this is not what the tunnel will look like. This is a hole in the box. This is the kind of tunnel that my cat would make. So yeah, it's curating as much of that as possible. And I think we can get away with making this look fantastic with minimal assets if we think about it in advance. So if we're putting a bridge here, that says to me we probably want water.
Yes.
We don't have to do the whole thing. We can smoke and mirrors it. In the same way that Wipeout makes you think you're in a huge Neo Tokyo, but actually it's a very closed-in experience. It feels huge because you've got blue sky above you and you've got these big tall walls, but actually you're in a tunnel the entire time. So that was my thing about that.
Awesome. So yeah, if you guys got any questions about the progress so far, and if you didn't get it from the little thing Jan said earlier, this is going to be our next big project. We will be kickstarting it soon.
Very soon. In fact, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's happening with the Kickstarter.
Yeah, by all means.
Well, with you. Like, I don't have to do the soapboxy thing. You can do it too. Like,
yeah.
So, we have an idea for what the base product looks like. If we don't hit it, let's start with that. We're going to teach a watered-down version of what we're talking about. And it's probably going to be something like making a racing model with 3D physics. Like, how do you make a hover racer? We won't be going into how you make the game. We won't be going into AI. We're just going to be handling a floating vehicle on a track. The way it works right now is if you're not on the track, you don't hover. Your thrusters power down. The glow powers down. At the base level, we're talking about a large course. Yeah, we're not going to be... Mikey's just reminded me, don't talk about prices. None of that's finalized. Like, we know what the process looks like. We're talking about a base course. We provide assets. We don't do an assets course at the base. But in that, we're talking about the physics. We're talking about the race logic. We're talking about AI section, so making AI drivers. And Bastian has been helping us with that. Bastian, I forgot his last name. Bass. If you know YouTube, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
He's been helping us a lot with debugging code, making particles, and he's been writing the AI section for us. And it's really cool. He's made a fantastic little state machine that uses the node tree. And we're talking with him about him teaching that part of the course, which means we need to raise that money for him, right? We can't ask him to dedicate that much time out of his life and not pay him.
Well, we could do, but that would be incredibly harsh.
Yeah, pay people for their work. We would include sound effects, we'd include music, and look at a few other things. We'd do tutorials on the shader effects and stuff like that. There's a lot of fun shader stuff happening here, and a lot more coming. Like, this is very early. Some of the stretch goals we have include things like more assets, modular assets, and an assets course, all of which are one thing. Right? So we would, instead of saying here is one ship type, would say here are 4 ship types, or whatever. Like, this is all up in here.
And one of the things we'd like to do if we got to that stage was not only give you those assets that you could use, but also give you those assets that you could use and the equivalent of the source code. So you would actually get the blend file itself, not just a made model at the end, but the blend file itself. Not only can you see how it was put together, but you'd also be able to access things like the array modifier, if that was used during the creation of it, so that you can bespoke the assets more easily than you would be able to do otherwise.
Yep. We're looking at a music course and possibly a VST course, how to use a virtual synthesizer thing. I forget what VST stands for. It stands for Virtually Sure It's a Toolbox.
We'll go with that.
Yeah. Things like Helm, FM synthesis, right? How you can make some really cool sound effects. We'd like to hire a sound designer to make better sounds. Like, the stuff we have in there is either paid for, and so we can't put it in the course, or really basic.
Yeah.
And it's fine, but we're at the point now where actually good assets make a huge difference.
And we don't want to diss pre-made packs out there.
Oh, no, they're great. We just can't distribute them.
We can't distribute them, so that's one of the issues with that. We can also, obviously, like Open Game Art is a wonderful repository of music, of sounds, of assets. And then you've got loads of places like that. But when you're trying to make a very specific game, as I'm sure you're aware of yourselves if you've been trying to do something like this, you very quickly run up against a brick wall where it's not quite your style, or the things that are available don't suit the game that you're making. Like the music that we want to do for this game will be very high octane.
It's almost house, really. I mean, it's not quite house, but
it would verge on hard house or drum and bass esque, that sort of thing, because it's a high octane, high energy thing. We're going to be putting down beats that are 140 BPM plus, so quite high energy.
We'll be throwing shapes in the House of Groove.
Totally, and I may even put a rock one in there.
I think you should.
Now I've got my guitar. Now I've got my guitar plugged in. That'd be awesome.
Yep. So there's a bunch of stretch goals we want in. We do have an internal number of what we call the big stretch goal, and I'm not going to talk about the number because it's If we get to a quite large number, and it sounds like a ridiculous number, the idea is, okay, let's spend a couple of years and just turn this into a professional game.
Yeah.
The thing is, in order to do that, we basically have to become a different kind of company. Right? We can't go around making several tutorials a year and make this full-time.
No, our focus would have to switch 100% to doing
I mean, we'd make the course
Yeah.
on this, because that's the commitment. But at that point, we become a game company, which means we don't have income coming in, which means we need to pay for ourselves and taxes and all the rest of it, and hire expertise and bring in assets and license music and all the rest of it, which adds up really quickly. So there is a way for that to happen.
Yeah.
And we were also talking this morning with Bass. There's a possibility that once we finish the course, we just want to keep working on it, at which point maybe a Patreon or something like that.
Yeah, there are plenty of options, and it depends how we want to scope it in such a way that if it does get a community excited about it and they want to back such a project, that it's possible for that to happen rather than us draw short at just a certain level.
Yep. We're also talking about add-ons. So here's the thing, right? We have a set number that would allow us to work with Bass, take some time to do this thing, polish up the assets, make it all a nice seamless experience, get the, it takes a lot of time, and time is rent. But we want to make it easy for people who want to give a little bit more money but don't necessarily need the other stuff. So one of the things we'll talk about is add-ons. And one example add-on is, and this would have to be a very limited number of things because otherwise we just don't have time to do them, is custom assets. So
Yes.
for instance, you could design a logo for a team, or you could have a billboard, or have your name somewhere in the game, something like that. Just a little like, here's a little extra money, and for that we'll work with you to put something in. We will have to work with you to put that in because I'm not having rude things everywhere, so I can't distribute the course. This is a family show. Yeah. So that's one example. We're also talking about like, well, there's a bunch of different stretch goals. I'd love to get some merchandise in. I really, really, really want to find a company that will make custom rubber ducks and make them make a toucan one, so we can have a toucan for rubber duck coating. So you have a little toucan, but you know, we could easily lose money on that deal.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I could show you how to model one in Blender.
I could teach you, but I'd have to charge.
That's the one. Oh, brilliant.
All right. I want to show the architecture that Bass has come up with for the AI.
Exciting.
This is very, very early days, and he's still working on it, but he's got the basic framework thing. And
I'm going to put you full screen, Jan, and I'm going to nip and go get myself a drink. So I'll see you guys back in a moment.
So let's go to an NPC. That was wrong. Let's go to an NPC. And I'm going to open the NPC in here. So, an NPC is a type of hovercar, right? So, if we open the hovercar class, we go into that, it's actually right at the top, class name hovercar, right? So, it knows this is a hovercar. The NPC is a type NPC. So, we have a hierarchy built in. It's extending the script, right? So, everything that the hovercar can do, it can do plus extra things. But if we go down here, it has something called an AI brain. And within that, there's a little script that just says, how do you pick which state you are? And every node that's underneath is a possible state. And it'll just change the order and pop them in and out as it needs them. So it can load them in. So if you get a weapon or something like boost, it needs to know when am I going to use boost. You don't use it just before you hit a corner.
That's okay, they can't hear that.
Okay, I can hear that. Got attacked by an elephant. So there's a lot. You basically write a different state in here for the kind of behavior you want, and then the brain will just load them in. And all of these controls control the NPC script. Okay, so the NPC script is actually very, very simple. I mean, a lot of it is just picking up things and painting the car and doing stuff like that and handling the glow of the car. All the work is being done in hovercar and in the brain. So we're offloading everything into the component parts. And what that means is we can start adding things like personalities. We can start weighing things differently. And we don't have to, for instance, call the AI every frame. We could do it, say, every 5 frames and really optimize the game. And that's going to make the drivers feel more realistic because they're now not going to have ungodly responses to everything, right? 5/60ths of a second, which is longer than a 60th of a second. I thought I could do that in my head.
5 times longer. 5 times longer.
Thank you. It's a 12th of a second. Yeah? Yeah. I was a professor. It is a better reaction time. So there's a lot we can do with that. But it's a really lovely system. And we can, at some point, bring these other... Where's it go? These other brains out and say, okay, this is an aggressive brain and all the rest of it. Bass was even suggesting that there's stuff we could do with... what do you call them? Personalities.
Yep. I mean, it would be brilliant to have some... I don't know what is currently possible, what is not, but I could foresee some that will only go for things like... Although the pickups are random at the moment, but we could have them not and the AI go for the boost. It could be a character that just wants to go as fast as possible, or a defense one, or an aggressive one that will actively try and ram you. You know,
well, Mass was even saying that if you ram him a certain amount of times, he becomes aggressive.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of flexibility in the system.
I mean, the particular AI state machine for that could actually then be used in many other cases as well. That actual structure of how the AI is put together.
Yeah, and something interesting came of that. And I was telling Mikey about it earlier. Bass and I were talking yesterday. We were looking at like how to split the AI off into these little brains and things. He was showing me what he'd done. And we realized you just take some of that and you have a homing missile, right? You just give it a slightly different code set. What that means is we've now got this modular system. We have UR automatic navigation. So any weapon that needs it, any vehicle that needs it, whatever else. And that made me think, well, I've been building this weapon. I built a weapon called Shockwave, which I can show you in a bit. And what it does is it says, are you in range? If you're in range, then take this much, be pushed away from the center of the shockwave by a certain amount of force, and then take damage. Well, what if that's not a weapon? What if we have something called an explosion? An explosion is an object that can cause that to happen.
Yep.
And we can just drop it in to whatever needs it. So let's say a missile has an explosion. So when it hits, it'll trigger explosion, and the explosion will say, what's the energy? That tells me the diameter of the explosion. It tells me how much damage I do to the thing, and then I'll just destroy the parent. Right? It's just going to go away. But if that's the case, you can also give that to, say, an NPC or a hover car, right? So if a hover car can explode, that means if I hit it with a missile, it will then cascade and explode and damage anything nearby and push them out the way. Because we're simulating physics, right?
Yep.
We can do that. So now we have a system whereby, okay, so a shockwave is a type of explosion, and a missile can explode. So if a shockwave hits the explosion, you can destroy the missile before it hits you.
Yep. You can deploy it as a
If you're close enough,
defensive
you'll
shield.
take damage.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a blast wave. We now have systemic gameplay just by having these two things: modular AI and a modular weapon system. And suddenly it just changes the nature of the game. There's a lot of things we can do. I mean, Mikey discovered we could do J-turns.
Yes, I love doing that. And as soon as you mentioned about the explosions, the first thing that popped into my head, of course, was, oh, I could put red barrels along the track. You know what that means?
I mean, don't, but you could.
Well, you could.
Mikey had another great idea. When he saw my shockwave, he's like, can God do ragdoll? I'm like, yes, you can. Can I make a stand full of 400 people and you can ragdoll them all? Like, no.
Well, I thought you could turn the explosion into an implosion. So it sucks things towards it. And if you set it off too near the stands, some of the
Hey, Jelly!
Ah! Yeah. Well, I thought that was a good idea. Not all of my ideas are good.
It's not that it's a bad idea. It's that the aesthetic now changes dramatically. You've made a clown simulator.
It's now MagRacer Ageddon.
Yeah, like now the theme song is not like hard house and industrial. Now it's but it also leads to different kinds of weapons we can have. So one weapon we can have is an orbital strike. That
would be awesome.
Someone ahead of you, and it will draw a distance in front of where they are now, draw some beam of light, a few beams of light randomly on the track around that point, and then set off explosions. So you now have to run a gauntlet.
That would be awesome.
The fact that this is all simulated physics means there's a lot we can do. And I really like the idea that if I ram Mikey off the road in local multiplayer, which is a possible stretch goal, I could be thrown off and hit someone else and then die. Like the explosion, that radically changes how you play the game. Because now being close, like being in a tight-knit pack like that, becomes incredibly dangerous.
Especially if one person sets off a bomb. And of course, the orbital strike, if you're going through the tunneled section of the level, is a useless weapon.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot we can do. And there's some fun weapons I want to put in. I still want to put in the jelly field. Hey, jelly. Which, instead of a mine, is just... It will just slow you down.
It's like sludge.
Yeah, it basically forces the brakes on. And I also just like saying mine. It's fun.
Mine.
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 I can't do too much of that.
Yep.
So yeah, we've had absolutely tons of fun so far putting this together.
Yep. And there's a bunch more we could show, and I do want to show the shockwave a little bit, but
That's an awesome idea, Jen. I just want to shout. I plan to take down the route of dolly mixtures and licorice all sorts. I can imagine a city with those assets. You know.
Easily.
Can you? Oh dear, excuse me.
Zoolander?
So there was a game going back maybe 20 years that had Zool, ZOOL, Zool.
Oh, that's Zool. Not I am the Keymaster.
No, with was it Chubba Chups or whatever? And you went through all this Candyland.
Are these words?
I'm just making them up.
The Chubby Chubs and Zool.
Zool.
So they were the worst band ever.
Yes. Yeah, I remember. How far gaming's come. I'm segueing off into retro gaming now. Off we go.
Again. I was just checking if we have any messages on Reddit.
Yes, so we. One of the things that will that you guys can do to help, if you think that this is something that's exciting and is something you want to help out with, the best thing you can do is just mention us occasionally. Don't go ahead and spam people, but say like, hey, and be honest to yourself. You know, say this looks really exciting. I hope you guys find it exciting too, or whatever.
There's a couple of people I know who stream, who are students of us, that when we're a little closer and a little more stable, and we get the Kickstarter on, I might offer a prototype for that they can stream.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that'd be really exciting to see other people playing it as well. Obviously, we both enjoy it quite a bit anyway, and that's kind of what happened with Gotta Getaway. So up until a point where that was not so fun to play with, it's still in its very early prototype stage. The moment it clicked and suddenly it was fun to play was the moment we wanted to make it into a course to share.
We're actually pretty close to that now.
Yeah, exactly. That it's teetering on the edge of that not a number crash, and just a few other bits and bobs to make it come together. I think at a decent level.
I mean, it was fun when I started making the other teams, and you have a craft with like a green dragon on it. That was always great.
Yeah.
But actually, this game is just fun to drive around in. And when you start developing expertise, like if I show a little bit of what you can actually do. So Wipeout is effectively a roller coaster, right? It's very fast, but you're on rails. You're not really going up and down. Like there's some side-to-side motion.
Yeah.
But it's actually quite a limited thing. Like you can't go backwards very fast. I mean, you can, but not really. What we can do, let me start the game first.
Jan's got an idea.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, let's bring you in full screen.
Great. Let's change team.
Hey.
Right. I'm going to be Worm. And
3, 2,
what we can do
1, go.
is... First, we don't have to fake this uppy-downy nonsense. The craft is going up and down because it's actually being repelled by the track, right? I also like these trails. Like we can customize those and pick the colors you want. I pressed the wrong button. Again, I gotta stop doing that.
A round of applause for you. I think it will resume automatically once you redo it. Yeah, there we go.
No, it won't.
I mean, my end, it will resume. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, for you it will. Okay, so let me turn off the thing.
Go.
One thing we've noticed is when you're flying, you can actually overtake and undertake people because you're actually following this curved track. But you can also J-turn, right?
Yeah, you have to drift
You
at
can
the same
drift
time.
around corners. So, because we're calculating the physics, we can drift power. We can do power slides. We can drift. We can do all kinds of fun things.
I mean, the first time that I literally undertook someone, I overtook them by going underneath them round a corner. I got very
it's an
excited
amazing
by the
feeling.
fact.
Like it feels really good. Like right now, these trails are still very, very early thingammy. But if I turn these guys back on, Just eliminate that player.
Oh, they've just
First off,
boosted, yeah.
they're boosted away, and I've just crashed. But that kind of fluid motion feels really good. The fact that we can get some expertise. The fact that now when you're coming up to a slope, you have to apply the brakes. Because there's so much physics happening, you're going to grind against it. The brake, it doesn't act as, I'm going to go backwards or I'm going to stop thrusting. All it does is change the damping. We're just changing the air friction on your vehicle. Which gives you a lot of control, a lot of aerodynamics. There's that silent moment.
I'm just responding to a text elsewhere, so...
Yep. Not me. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fun things happening. Another thing I like is, you know what, I'm going to share my engine for this one. Typical. Crash. Here we go. Share my Goto engine. Okay, so these teams, I'm using File Grabber. Now, if you've watched my work before, you know I like to make a File Grabber script. And what we're doing when we make the team, in fact, I'm just going to show you my lobby. Let's go to Team Select. Where's the thing? Not Team Select. Never mind. I'm not going to show you that. What we're doing is we're going to Vehicles, which is here. And we have texture sets. Each one of these is an actual texture. So here is this horrible pink and gold one with gold flowers and brocade I made just to make Jess's eyes roll. It's fine. Here's Beowulf, right? So it's just, here's a material. This one seems to be a shader for no reason. Here's Archangel. Anything that's in this folder gets added to the list.
Yep.
So all we need to do is put that there. I can move that folder from the game to the user file, which means it's now accessible as to the player.
Yeah.
Which means you can make a bunch of ships and players can just put them into their game. When we start the game, NPCs are randomly picking a team. So it's just saying, okay, your teams is File Grabber, get files, that folder, bring all of them back, and then just pick one.
Yep.
And that's it. Paint Chassis is a script in Hovercar, and it just says, find that texture. Where is it? Here it goes. Find that texture and load it in. Done. So it's a really simple way of doing that. The reason we're doing it this way is we want everything here to be modular, right? We want everything to be easy to add and plug in and take away. It allows assets to work that way. It allows components to work that way. It allows weapons to be built and built and built. It means if you guys think of a different kind of weapon, like maybe you don't want a homing missile or an orbital strike, maybe you want exploding caltrops, or you want a jelly cannon, right? That fires things that slow people down. You just take the bit you like, tweak it, put it in the weapons folder, which I've just closed, which works exactly the same way, and it'll work great.
Yeah, it's amazing how when you build a system that's designed to be put together in pieces, it gives you options you wouldn't have thought of previously. Mm-hmm. And also the scope to be able to change things around without too much recoding.
Yep. So yeah, the more modular we can make it, and that kind of design paradigm really makes life easy for us. I've just realized there we go. Now I can see. Really makes life easy for us. And that's kind of what we're going for. And it's interesting, 3 of us working on this project on very different time zones. Bass is in Australia. Mikey's in England. I'm in a strange dimension of my own devising. With dragons.
Well, I thought you were going to say Mikey's in some sort of random time zone of his choosing at any one time.
I think right now you're paying more attention than I am.
Very true, very true.
We're having to be very careful how we branch and merge the source code, right? Because I'm making a whole bunch of changes to the way weapons work, and at the same time, Bass is changing AI, and these two things intersect. So, very strong discipline. And Bass is very good about saying, okay, I've made a new class. This is called an AI brain. And it knows it has to be a child of an NPC. It must be a direct child of an NPC or it just won't work.
And this is perhaps one of the core principles we'll get across in the course itself, is not just when you're working by yourself, but how can you work in a small team? Because that's a discipline that, if you're just going at it alone, you don't actually need to care about. Naming conventions would be a low fruit to nail really quickly. But if you're not building things in a modular way, if everything was, for example, in one big script, there's no way that two people could work on it at the same time. So actually having that modularity is one of the key ways of making sure many people can work on a project at once.
And I quite like the way that the explosion thing has led to a whole bunch of systemic possibilities. And it makes me, because we were talking about systemic games a few months ago, it makes me wonder if there's some other stuff we could do, like fire, or electrified, or magnetized, right? Just something you can just drop into it, and if it's in there, it'll start affecting that ship and everything around it.
Yeah, I've just got this thing where hypermagnet and all the ships that are close by just go dink and stick to you.
But collision damage and explosions. So think about what's going to happen. If you fire a magnet pulse at somebody, you magnetize their vehicle. Anything close by that's tagged as metallic hits it. So if you've got a bunch of people ahead of you, just slow down and fire that.
But my ship's made from carbon fiber.
Yes, and I'm wearing special magic armor that's impervious to your rebellion bullets.
Acme magnet, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that might be somewhat trademarked. I don't know. It might be out of it now. We could have a big anvil that drops on a player.
I mean, we could. Yeah.
We could. We should. We probably shouldn't.
I don't know about should. I think we could. There's a few things we could do. I mean, one of the most annoying controls I see in these games is one that reverses the controls left and right.
Yeah.
It's fine. Getting the AI to do that convincingly is very difficult.
Yeah, because they know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely something that works better. And that's a key thing. If you don't test it with AI and without AI, it's very easy to think something like reversing controls there would be no issue with. Until you realise the AI doesn't have this problem. If it needs to just reverse the controls...
Well, it's either going to completely break, or it's going to ignore it. Like, you have to program in faking that steering.
Yeah. And I don't know how you'd do that. Need a course on it.
Well, that's an AI problem, so I don't do it. Bass does it. I'm working on weapons and physics.
I can just see this Trello board here where I've got a few on assets, you've got some, and then Bass has just got...
It's just got cry. Are there any weapons you guys would like to see?
Silly or otherwise, we're open to all sorts of suggestions.
I mean, it occurs to me if we've got... Because the way we're doing the physics makes this possible. If we've got a shockwave or an explosion as just a type of interaction, then we can start having things like magnetized and fire and all the rest of it. Ow, ow, ow. Dumbest allergy in the world.
Are you allergic to yourself?
Yep.
Yeah. I shouldn't laugh.
And yet somehow...
I shouldn't laugh, but I often
You're
do.
going to.
Yes. Okay, so we're just on about the hour now in terms of presenting our new idea and how it's progressing, and I just wonder whether you guys have any final questions, because we want to get back onto it. Well, actually, I want to go to bed and sleep, but
I want to open the window and make it cool. A damping weapon that makes steering slower. Yeah, actually, that's entirely doable.
That's almost like the sludge, isn't it? But instead of it being for your velocity...
It's just going to make corners much more difficult.
You're now in a barge.
I like that a lot.
A mag barge.
I mean, there's also things you could do with, like, a shroud. That's just going to make it harder to see beyond a certain distance. And that you could do with an NPC, because you just pull back the look ahead.
Could we have a shrink ray? I'm thinking back to the days of Duke Nukem, where you just go tiny.
I mean, that's going to give you a massive advantage, because nothing's going to be able to hit you.
Apart from your velocity.
And it's going to have a huge impact on physics.
Well, the only way of trying it is to try it, isn't it, and see what happens.
I think part of the way of trying it is to do a thought experiment and go, no, I don't think it's going to work.
How about the attack blob? It just makes your ship 45 meters wide.
That blocks that's the width of the track.
Welcome to the whale weapon.
I can speak whale.
Okay, I will miss the beginning. Yes, we are coming up to launching this as a Kickstarter in the coming future. Probably within a month or so, as we're putting things together. We want to tighten everything up. One thing we learnt from Gotta Getaway, our previous game, was that we want it to be in a stage where it's all ready and ready to go. And the other thing we do really want to do is get the assets nailed so that by the time that the course comes out, you're using final assets. Last time we did courses in parallel, which meant that the assets were never going to be the full assets in the Gotta Getaway game, were the coding side of things, because they hadn't been made yet. It was as simple as that.
Yeah, and it was a thing where when I finished doing the coding part of that course, I then went back with Mikey's thing, and the game felt completely different. Like, completely different. So this time we want to get those in early. An EMP with a ship has no energy for a period of time. I think that's a very interesting idea. Part of what's interesting about that is the game actually uses the track to power the vehicle. In other words, if you're not directly over the track and within range, you have no control. And one of the things you can do is disable steering, for example, and thrust, and you just drift. You just have to do that for half a second, and that's gonna really change how the thing goes. I've just had the IM, and it says a gun with a little flag that says bang when you fire it.
Yep.
I think that's doable. I think that's going in the game.
I was thinking if you're too far from the track, you have no power. How about if we actually added height adjust to the game? You could, we were talking earlier about the person saying, why can't we fly really low? And the problem with flying really low is you're going to hit the ground and go flying off. But if you were skilled enough to hold the craft quite low, perhaps you get an increase in power, but you also have a risk of hitting the ground and flying off.
Well, okay, so what's happening right now is we have 4 rays underneath the vehicle in a line. Okay? And the front one is tilted forward slightly. If a ray intersects something that is magnetized, which is just a collision layer, so anything that is marked as magnetized will count, it will push the vehicle up by a certain amount. So if all 4 are hitting it, you're going up. We can lower that and have you drifting along the track. What's happening is if you then start going up, you don't have enough lift to go up with the track.
But who knows? It's something that we can test and either throw out or... That's the thing. Some of these ideas sound great, and then you implement them and you're like, nope, this breaks the game.
Well, I'm hoping that once we teach people how to make these as modular things and get them to work, like this explosions thing, anything that can explode will have an explosion node with export variables. So you just give it the energy it needs, like when you write it in. And then when it receives it'll just say, when you die, explode.
Yeah.
Okay? If that happens, that'll just work. Now you know how to make any weapon in the game explode. So let's say, I don't know, Jelly wants to make a jelly field gun that slows people down, but maybe Azrael wants to make a mortar. It's the same thing, but it explodes. You could just make the thing and change it how it works.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Once you've got a certain class of weapon, you can keep adding to it as much as you want. I mean, essentially, whether it's one big explosion or maybe a cluster of explosions, they do less damage, but it spreads out over a wider area.
You know, I was thinking about a wall gun. There was a Wipeout-inspired game that dropped energy walls, like quite narrow, behind you instead of a mine. And if you hit it, you just slow down. Especially with the collision damages we have. Now, right now, collision damage is 2%. And the reason that is we're going very, 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 very fast around a bendy course. I tried to make it 10%. That wasn't very fun. I do want to have a way of recharging the shield.
Perhaps that's one of the pickups.
Something.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking it's a pickup, but if you use it, we need a discard button for our weapons first. But if you use it, I want it to slow the craft down. Like your thrust will slow down, and your shield will go up. And if you take a hit, it'll just switch off.
Yeah.
So if anyone rams you,
Or you hit
shoots
the
you,
wall.
or you hit a wall,
Yeah.
your shield recharge is done. So you risk losing your front place, and you go from there. I just realized I'm doing a lot of this.
You're merely caressing the camera. It's fine. We don't believe in personal space.
I believe in personal space. Don't listen to him. I'm not going to jail for this man.
I should totally put a mirror image of your background behind me.
Get your own house. Yeah, there's a bunch of fun ways we can do. I'm also interested to see. So right now I'm making these teams in Substance Painter, which is not something I'm looking to teach.
Yeah.
Mostly because it's not a free piece of software. It's a very good piece of software. And mostly because, and partly because, if you don't buy it off Steam, you have to go through Adobe's subscription model, and I hate it. Like, I got it off Steam, I paid a one-off thing. I'm not getting the same kind of support and access that people who subscribe are, but I'm fine with that. I'll just pay once and just have the thing.
I mean, that's
But
one
I
of
am
the
interested
things.
to see what
Yeah.
other craft people can make.
Yeah.
We're also possibly thinking about moving them to decals. So you pick the ship color you want, and then the team is just going to be a decal on top of that.
It could be stamped on.
So we'll see.
Awesome. So, any final questions in the chat? And of course, I'm going to now wait a while because that's going to take a few moments to do.
La 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 la.
Oh dear. So, Jan, when was the last time you got out of the house?
I mean, I went for a walk today. If you mean when was the last time I spoke to a human being that wasn't like on a camera? I don't know. It's been a while. Living by myself in the country in a pandemic, you know.
Oh,
It's not great for my social life.
That's great to hear, Right Angle Games. I'm glad you're enjoying it, even though you haven't had a chance to play it yet.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Well, if we have no other questions, then I think we should just express our sentiments through the medium of interpretive dance. Mikey.
How's that one?
Great dance.
Jazz hands.
Those are not magic fingers. These are magic fingers.
Okay, we're descending into silliness, as always. Thank you,
All right, folks.
everybody, for joining us this evening and giving us some ideas and your feedback. If you're watching this afterwards, should really say this towards the beginning of the stream and not the end. But yeah, if you happen to have watched the entire thing afterwards, thank you for rewatching it. And leave any comments below in the comments, any suggestions, things like that.
In the suggestions. Yeah.
Yep. All good. And my sign off is getting long, so thank you and good night.
And good night and thank you.
What a muppet.